Hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Really thrilled to have you. We are going to be doing a couple of important stories. We're going to bring you a few ups and a few oopsie daisies from Kentucky politicos on the national stage. Then we are excited to be chatting with Jimmy Earley, the program director of Glean Kentucky, a nonprofit focused on tackling the twin challenges of food waste and food insecurity in the bluegrass. So we'll hear from him and the work that they're doing in this very important season. And we'll close out with a call to action in support of our new campaign for a nonpartisan voting fix for Kentucky. Should be a good show. Thanks for joining us. But before we get into it, are you ready to help create a more compassionate Commonwealth? I know you are, because you're here. You're watching this, you're listening to this, you somehow stumbled across it. It's clear we're going to need long-term power building to create better policies and political outcomes in Kentucky. We hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our campaign to make that happen. If you, like us, want to see that work get done, if you appreciate what we're up to, please show it with a donation. Our tech platform that we use to bring the show to you has increased its monthly fee by about $20. So we really could use a new monthly donor or two to help us cover that increase in cost. Make a contribution right now via a secure online website. Act Blue to turn Kentucky purple. We'd love to have you support us. It's all, $5, $20, $50, whatever, it all adds up. Unfortunately, none of it is tax deductible because we are a political entity. So anyway, that's an important plea. It's the giving season, so maybe you want to be giving. But let's check in with our co-host. We're going to let you know who you are, where you are, what you're protesting today. So you're there on the internet. We mean you as well. Remember, folks, this is not some sort of talking heads interweb news show. This is a digital demonstration for a more compassionate Commonwealth. So we want to hear what you're fired up and most concerned about today. So put that in the chat while we're sharing ours. I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, specifically Childsburg, a deed-restricted community, very, very close to the growth boundary. In a sea of vinyl siding, my sign says, "Welcome, GAIA." So exciting news from the Progress Kentucky crew. There's only a couple of hosts today because one of our scheduled hosts had to go support his wife, who is giving birth right now. So really hoping, fingers crossed, everything's going well. And Chris Preece will be welcoming, and Ruin will be welcoming their second child into the universe. So congrats and Godspeed with all of that. So hope he's been getting his sleep. Anyway, let's check in with our co-host, Dr. Clardy. Are you there?
Yes, Aaron, I'm here reporting from Western Kentucky, Murray, Kentucky specifically. My protest sign is a riff off of an old saying by the Reverend T.D. Jakes. Get ready, get ready, get ready. Why do I say that? Former President Trump was on Meet the Press this past Sunday, and he alluded to the fact that he may be seeking to prosecute former January 6th committee member and former House member and the daughter of a former vice president, Lynn Cheney. This is totally unheard of in presidential politics, where people are talking about jailing their past opponents. This is something that you would hear in the Banana Republic. So get ready, get ready, get ready. There's going to be more of this in the years to come, sadly.
Oof. Yeah. That was quite an interview. Definitely, you could kind of see the vibe that he was like trying to soften some of his edges, but he just has a hard time ever, saying that he was, wrong or misstated something, or the way he said something was not, in fact, what he wants to do. But provide himself some outs, maybe, but also then double down on everything. Yeah, it was just really, not very compelling, and just, very committed to the lies, making sure that all the lies continued, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining us from all the way over there. You're even in a different time zone.
Yes, we're in the central time zone. So I had to remember to get on earlier at 5:45 to do their early sound check. So yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. We got a great show. Let's get into it. We'll start with news of the week. So yeah, we got a few stories we want to give you before we bring you to to our interview, our guest. Again, that's Jimmy Earley with Glean Kentucky. So what we're going to be covering today is the kind of rise and fall of a couple of Kentucky politicians on the national stage. I'm going to cover the folks who are rising. Dr. Clardy will cover the folks who are falling. So this story came to us from the Kentucky Lantern, our favorite source for Kentucky political news, because there is no paywall. So yeah, this one I'm sure interesting to a lot of the folks who watch this show. Andy Beshear, Governor Andy Beshear, has been voted chair-elect of the Democratic Governors Association for 2026. Yes, that's right, for 2026. This is not even 2025, so he's got a little bit of a runway there. But they voted last weekend to select him as chair-elect. He will be following their 2025 chair, Kansas Governor Laura Kelly. So they'll be chair through 2025, and then Andy will step in. Andy issued a statement saying that he looked forward to working with the Democratic Governors Association to continue to grow our ranks of Democratic governors in the years to come, and said, in Kentucky, we're shown that when you focus on bringing people together and the fundamental challenges families are facing every day, Democrats can win anywhere. I'm excited to build on that record to help elect and re-elect Democratic governors across the state so we can continue to make a positive difference for our states. So yeah, definitely exciting. I will say this seems like if you were somebody who wanted to have a big national presence, this would not be a bad position to seek and to win. So I don't know, Dr. Clardy, what do you think? Is this a clear sign that Governor Beshear is definitely running for president?
Well, he reminds me sort of Jimmy Carter in 1974 when he was outspoken Democratic governor. He was, of course, he left office in 1975 and had begun his presidential run. I had said when the governor rolled out his campaign last year when he came into Paducah on the bus tour, I'm like, this has all the echoes of a New Hampshire, an Iowa, or South Carolina. And even this past summer, when they were doing the vice presidential Veep states, the governor represented himself and the Commonwealth very well. And consider this: he is a Democrat who has won in the era of Obama and in the era of Trump. He has won Attorney General. But it wasn't, I mean, he barely beat Whitney Westerfeld, that's true. He barely beat Matt Bevin, that's true. But a win is a win. And he defeated Daniel Cameron by a sizable majority. The National Democratic Party would be foolish not to consider him as a contender for the presidency in 2028. And if I may be also personal, I would certainly support him myself. And I think I speak for millions of people across the country and in this Commonwealth who feel that Andy Beshear is a rising star in national politics.
Well, I mean, I think you can't argue with the fact that he's a rising star, right? The guy was like on the short list for VP.
Yes.
That was pretty awesome. He got a lot of national attention in that moment. Yes. He then became, I think, a really, powerful, person to represent, Vice President Harris on the stump. Did a lot of work for her, along with a number of governors. Right? A lot of governors worked. Andy didn't have a lot to do in Kentucky for her. No one thought that we were in play. Obviously, we weren't. So, his prominence certainly didn't make Kentucky more competitive. But yeah, I think he did a great job at the Democratic National Convention. I think his ability to kind of help deliver Hadley Duvall as an advocate.
Yes.
That was awesome. But yeah, I think he does a good job of making the arguments of what Democrats should be saying and how they should be finding common ground with more conservative voters or non kind of very like most folks, non-ideological voters, right? So yeah, I think it was a great job with in that space. You know, I think every time people mention him as like a kind of governor who likes bipartisanship, you know, I think heads explode in Frankfurt, right? Because I don't think the GOP in Frankfurt see him as a bipartisan person, because, you know, he doesn't like come and work with them. He doesn't really, you know, I think do much to kowtow to their supermajority, which, you know, I just think that's his right. He's the governor.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's I love seeing him get the attention. There's other elements of the story, right? So turns out he had a super PAC in New Hampshire to help some New Hampshire politicians.
Yes.
Why would you do that?
If you're not running for president, exactly.
Has he started a South Carolina?
If he starts going to South Carolina and Iowa, he's definitely running for president.
Yeah. You know, the early primary states are a little bit muddy right now, right? Because like New Hampshire seemed to be kind of like not really following the guidance of the DNC. But yeah, he's, I mean, unless something dramatic happens, I think it is incredibly likely he makes a very strong run, and I think we'll see what the government, you know, the voters, primary voters say. I think he's a compelling guy, though. I will say this also in that article shows that you know, he's not running for the Senate, right? So there's a lot of people who were talking about a potential open seat or in 2026. But seems like not so much. Also, Willie Carver's in the chat, and he wants to see Andy Beshear walking the runway because apparently Willie Carver thinks Andy's an attractive individual. All right, so let's go. There's one more Kentucky politician that's kind of on the rise that I wanted to mention before we talk about the dissent of some politicians. Brett Gutherie, who's not some. We've mentioned his name on this show probably 4 times, right? Because he is not the representative for, you know, a lot of Kentucky. He's got like the kind of Bowling Green, but it's a big district because you know, it's awfully rural. It doesn't have a lot of big population areas in it. Doesn't have, you know, the blue dots of Louisville or Lexington or Northern Kentucky. But you know, he's been plugging away for a while. He is the 2nd congressional district representative. This is a story from the Herald Leader, and he has actually won the chairmanship of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. This is no joke. Like, this is like probably one of the most important and powerful committees in Congress, right? So there's been shakeups in, you know, the Republican leadership. He's been on this committee for a very long time. I think he's chaired a healthcare subcommittee, and you know, so he's now gotten the nod to take chairmanship of the full committee. So he's gonna have a lot of power. He's gonna have a lot of influence. You know, as I mentioned, this is a committee that deals with healthcare. So if the Trump administration is serious about his concepts of a plan to get rid of Obamacare, this will be the committee in the House to manage that. So good luck, Brett. I just don't know that. I don't know that those concepts of a plan are anywhere close to a plan. So I can imagine this being a bit of a train wreck if they really wade in to healthcare reform. And he'll be the guy that gets the, you know, the credit or well, I don't know that you ever get the credit for that kind of thing. You know, Trump would get the credit if he did anything to, you know, reform or change Obamacare. But if he screwed it up, he'd probably get some blame. So, you know, some downsides here for sure. But it's interesting. And I do think his district, and again, you know, kind of my pet issue right now is like what's happening with the Inflation Reduction Act moving forward. It's the single largest investment in climate change, kind of clean energy in the history of the world. The Biden administration did not get very much credit for it. And, you know, it wasn't, I think, the benefit to them politically. It should have been back in November, because, you know, it's been super clear for a long time. The Democrats are the only party that really give a single care about climate change, right? You know, the Republicans basically reject it. They think it's some sort of hoax, right? And the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, didn't force any changes, but it incentivized a lot of changes, a lot of clean energy manufacturing and domestically produced clean energy manufacturing. It really did two things. It supported, the kind of investment in clean energy and made sure that that was happening with U.S. manufacturing, right? So trying to kind of bring back things from China where they'd kind of leapt ahead. So Representative Gutherie, Energy and Commerce, right? So this is going to be an important committee for energy legislation. But his district is actually won out for a lot of EV investments, a lot of battery manufacturing, recycling. A lot of that stuff is happening in his district. So that's always when it's like, well, we like to say that we hate what the Biden administration's done, and it's all like, this kind of climate change, like hoax. But when it comes to like real jobs, I think that's where they get a little bit more uncomfortable, and they don't really, I don't know, I want to claw back all this stuff that's actually providing my constituents with work. So it'll be interesting to see how he walks that line, and whether he, because I think I've seen pictures of him at plant openings, right? Or like groundbreakings for some of these big, huge factories that are happening in his district to build EVs. Like, he's happy to show up, get the cameras to say that he supported the stuff that he, didn't actually even vote for.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I don't know much about Guthrie though. I don't know. Is he your rep?
No, my representative is chairman of the Oversight Committee, Jamie Comer, who just got reelected. He defeated Aaron Marshall, of course, who was on the show. I've never met Congressman Guthrie. I've heard a lot about him. My concern, though, about him chairing this committee is the fact that how friendly will he be to the fossil fuel communities and the coal communities, even though he does have these EV plants in his backyard. I've never known him to actually tout the green collar economy or green jobs. I've never known for him to be a great conservationist. I've never heard that from him. It's going to be very interesting to see how he leans toward old, dirty energy, and how he leans toward those particular companies that are really adding to our climate problem in this country and globally. So that's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. He's at the top of the leadership. Of course, Jimmy Comer, my congressman, is over oversight. So Kentucky Republicans are actually doing the thing in the House.
And there's one more. So Andy Beshear, I think, is in the running for Financial Services Committee chairmanship. That's a big one. Andy Beshear has shown very little interest in doing anything for his constituents except those who are big banks. So I think he's well positioned to kind of get the nod. He also was the I think Kentucky election committee chair for the Trump administration, for the Trump campaign. So that, I'm sure, gives him, some kudos in the eyes of Trump. And this is definitely a GOP that is like in the, how high do we need to jump category in terms of working with Trump. So that'll be interesting to see. I think there could be a lot of power in the House in the GOP delegation from Kentucky.
If Trump likes Andy Beshear, Andy Beshear has this job, period, full stop.
Yeah, I'll say this. I am still pretty sure that if it wasn't for Trump, that Andy Beshear wouldn't have his job, right? In 2018, Amy McGrath made a very good run at that seat.
Good run.
Ultimately, she lost by like a few points. But Andy Beshear benefited from a big rally that Trump came and did in Richmond, which was like one of the most kind of conservative Republican vote rich areas for that district, and made it very clear that if you like Trump, you need to vote for Andy Beshear, right? So really, I think cut into Amy McGrath's ability to get those kind of crossover voters, and helped inspire more turnout from folks that maybe wouldn't have even shown up in the midterms, those kind of Trump voters that aren't super engaged, right?
Which is sad, because that would have been a good pickup for the party and for Colonel McGrath. And she ran as a moderate. She ran as a moderate when she ran for the U.S. Senate a few years ago. So it's quite a loss, but
it would have been nice to see her taking getting a role for sure in DC. I think where her heart was, for sure. All right, so that's the rise. That's what's happening in the rise. Tell us about the other side of the coin, Dr. Clardy.
In the fall, here we go again. Another concern about the health of Senator Mitch McConnell. This comes out of the Kentucky Lantern. He fell a few days ago at the U.S. Capitol. He's reported to be fine. He fell actually yesterday after a Republican lunch and sprained his wrist and sustained a small cut on his face, his office said in a statement. The Kentucky Republican, the Kentucky Lantern says, is doing fine. After medical attention, he has been cleared to resume his schedule, his office said in a 3-sentence statement to reporters. This is interesting. McConnell is 82, my dad's age, and a polio survivor, and he has tripped in the past. And last year, he had a couple of incidences where he literally froze in front of the camera. This raises some serious concerns and questions about Senator McConnell's health. And regardless of where you stand, Republican, Democrat, liberal, or conservative, you have to have compassion for the guy. I personally I'm not a physician, obviously, and I'm not his physician, but I would strongly recommend, as frail as he has looked, he looked very frail at Fancy Farm this past summer, that he seriously consider not seeking re-election in 2026. He's already stepped down as party chair. He may have to take it to the next level. Senator McConnell has been in office since 1985, 40 years now, coming up on 40 years. He has totally recast the Kentucky Republican Party, recreated it, and he has been perhaps one of the most effective Senate leaders since Lyndon Baines Johnson, the master of the Senate himself. The downside of Senator McConnell is the fact that when he had an opportunity to pull the plug on a potential second Donald Trump presidency by moving to have Trump removed from office, he did not take that opportunity. And that is something also the history will not forgive about Senator McConnell. But he is a towering force in Kentucky and national politics, make no mistake. So it is time for him to step down for his own health's sake. When you're 82 years old, you can't afford a whole lot of falls. You know, my mother just turned 79 years old in August, and I'm concerned about her tripping and falling. So yes, I extend that same courtesy to the senator.
Yeah, I mean, the whole freezing thing was a little bit weird too, yeah. Right? Like, it's clearly, I mean, he stepped out of leadership, right? So that was, I think, some sort of indication that he maybe wasn't up to the full challenges of the duties of the job. I'm glad ish that he's okay after his fall. Yes. But it seems like he probably shouldn't run again. I'm sure there's a big long queue of folks who will want to run for that. I think it's
I've heard a number of candidates mentioned.
If Andy Beshear, if we take them at the campaign's word that he is not going to run for that seat, then I just can't see there's any chance of any Democrat winning that seat.
Oh, probably not, because sadly enough, when it comes to electoral politics, especially at the national level, Republicans have the upper hand in Kentucky. She is a red state. I wish that were not true. I would like to see somebody like Rocky Adkins run. I would like to see Senator McGrath maybe take a possible run at it. Maybe Charles Booker. Would they win at a national level? It's very, very doubtful. But as long as that Trump machine and that MAGA machine is in control of the Kentucky Republican Party and the way that they run campaigns and the way they nationalize issues negatively against Democrats, I don't see us taking that seat.
Yeah.
And remember, 40 years ago, Senator McConnell barely won that seat. But when he lost to Senator Huddleston, but that was
when the Democrats had a lock on this state by and large, yes. Right? That was like the first sign that what
sounds wrong. Yes,
and I was not really around to know about that, but I will say it does seem like he is give the guy his flowers. Like he has helped reshape Kentucky politics, not in a compelling way, not in a way that would aligns with my values, certainly. And not, in a way that doesn't it's just gross how much he's been able to, push policy for money right? The kind of whole legalized bribery. First with the tobacco industry,
Right.
doing their bidding for as long as humanly possible and shaking them down for impressive amounts of campaign cash, right? And that was before, the Supreme Court.
Way before Citizens United.
Before Citizens United, he was still able to get those kind of corporate dollars and PAC dollars. He's and of course he was a huge opponent of McCain-Feingold and policies to try to limit the campaign financing and corporate influence. So he has reshaped politics, not in a way that I would say is better for the public, but certainly is better for large corporate interests.
And let's not forget, this is the same senator who refused a vote on Merrick Garland. Of course, Garland was not seated on the court. If Merrick Garland had been seated, maybe, who knows what the court would look like. If Hillary had won in 2016, who knows what the court would have looked like. My point is simply this: Senator McConnell has played a significant role since 1986 in terms of steering the court toward the right. His support for Rehnquist, his support for Alito, his support for Clarence Thomas even, and his support for Antonin Scalia. So he has been equally complicit in turning the court in a very, very conservative direction.
He stole a seat. There's just no way about it.
Let's just be real. Let's just be real.
And the Merrick Garland example did not hold when there was an alternate case that was basically the similar facts, right? He's like, oh well, of course we'll fill this seat. We control it, and so what if people have already started voting?
It was the biggest single act of hypocrisy that I can remember.
Yeah,
to push the Amy Coney Barrett nomination.
Yes, Amy Coney Barrett. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think, rolls in her grave every single time Amy Coney Barrett's name is mentioned, and the kind of squeaky voice is shared in their the deliberations of SCOTUS. So I think that's his legacy, is a incredibly conservative and destructive Supreme Court that took away a woman's right to choose, despite lying about settled decisions, right? Settled precedent in all of their questioning. And then, Trump 2.0. So whatever hellscape we end up with in the end of 4 years, it is 100% Mitch McConnell's fault. He chose not to, really allow for senators, didn't give them the ability to vote to convict Trump, right? He provided the cover despite being very done with Trump. I think politically, I don't think he personally has any use for Donald Trump
at all.
But that doesn't matter, because he empowered him to show back up again, 4 years later to do who knows what. And
the Tackett book that just came out, the Tackett biography that just came out a few weeks ago, The Price of Power, is required reading. I picked it up right before the Kentucky Book Festival this past year and looked through it. It is perhaps the seminal work on McConnell's contribution, and a lot of the things that we talk about, including his disdain for President Trump, is very well documented. That is required reading for any student of Kentucky politics.
All right. Well, I guess I need to get that one because you just assigned it. When Dr. Clardy speaks, I listen. All right. So we are going to move to our guest. Very thrilled to be joined this evening, Jimmy Earley. This is an organization that one of Progress Kentucky's board members put me kind of onto. Wasn't really aware of it, but Jimmy Earley is the program director for Glean Kentucky. Glean Kentucky is a nonprofit organization that gathers and redistributes excess fresh fruits and vegetables to nourish Kentucky's hungry. So very thrilled to be joined this evening by Jimmy Earley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on, you all. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, absolutely. So thrilled to take time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a very busy season for folks who deal with hunger. But just tell us a little bit about Glean Kentucky, what it does, how it does it.
Sure. So we're a nonprofit organization that's focused on food recovery, specifically produce, as you mentioned, and we essentially gather that, and we gather excess produce and redistribute it so that it doesn't end up in the landfill. We've been around for about 15 years. We started here in Central Kentucky in Lexington as a volunteer-run organization, and kind of over the course of the last 14 and 3/4 years, kind of morphed slowly into a staffed organization. Right now, we're working here in Lexington and in the surrounding counties in Central Kentucky. Also in South Central Kentucky and Bowling Green, and in North Central Kentucky, kind of emanating from Oldham County, around Henry and Trimble counties, and a little bit of Jefferson County as well.
Okay, that's quite a span. So you've got a lot of the Commonwealth you cover, and so volunteers and staff, so kind of staff managed volunteers, but seem to do a lot of work as an all volunteer group. I definitely understand the benefits and challenges of working with volunteers. So, and that's like a lot of growth in 15 years. So it sounds like you guys are serving an important need.
Yeah, I think we are. And yeah, I mean, it's grown fairly organically. We're still very, very, very much. Thank you. Still very much dependent on our volunteers who enact a lot of our programming. Just a couple of things that kind of differentiate us, I think, and just kind of help folks understand us better. We serve feeding organizations, so we're kind of a middleman in a way. We find food that's going to go to waste, and we deliver it primarily to feeding agencies. We don't do direct service. We do kind of have what we call neighborhood ambassadors. We have a couple of those who are people who have the capacity to work out of their households or apartment buildings and distribute food directly to people who need it without other nonprofit food organizations being involved with that. But yeah, what makes us a little bit different is that we don't have we have an office, but we don't have a physical storage space. We don't have a warehouse. So we're literally kind of a logistics organization, and we're picking produce up and delivering it from point A to point B. And what that enables us to do is that since we're working with produce that sometimes is kind of on the edge of expiration, it enables us to do that just a little bit more quickly than a typical food bank would. There's no red tape for us to cut through, so it enables us to literally kind of be an on-time organization. And we get the call. Sometimes it's scheduled, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we get calls from farmers or grocery stores. For instance, we had an instance recently in Lexington during a storm where there was a massive power outage. A grocery store lost power for 3 days, and we were able to kind of help them redistribute all of the food that just kind of would have died on their shelves, which was thousands of pounds, in less than 48 hours. So that's kind of what we do.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great service for sure. Dr. Clardy, question?
I'm going to introduce my question by simply saying, after Thanksgiving and the food we had to get rid of that we did not consume during the Thanksgiving break, that we are guilty as charged, and will most likely repeat that same cycle after Christmas. That said, tell us how big a problem food waste and food insecurity are in this Commonwealth.
It's massive, and I'm just kind of gonna go national with this. I'll give you a few Kentucky specific statistics as well, but let's start with the national aspect of it. And I'll qualify this just by saying that all of these statistics are probably not quite accurate, because it's a really difficult thing to measure, and obviously when you're talking about retail outlets, et cetera, and even nobody wants to cop to being a food waste contributor, right? So, but from what we know, and these are probably statistics from 2022 because it takes a while for these studies to become public, but according, I believe, to the USDA, in 2022, 30 to 40% of our national food supply was going to waste annually. And of that waste, 40% of that is household waste at the household level, as you spoke to.
Sadly.
Also, we are all guilty as charged. We all buy food that we don't end up using. I work for a food recovery organization. It happens in our household too. But that results just purely economically at a household level, that results in an average of $2,500 in wasted food per household. Not to mention all of the other aspects of it. In Kentucky, over 25% of households in 36 counties, which is better than a quarter of our counties, experience food insecurity. So it's a huge issue for Kentucky. And in terms of where we reside nationally on those statistics, we're about in the middle. We're not great. We're not terrible in terms of if we're judging, all of the 50 contiguous states on their food waste statistics. We're kind of in the middle.
Wow. So that seems like a big problem, right? So definitely, this is something that is happening all around us. I guess you think about it, it's like, well, the nature of fruit and vegetables and produce, like the fact that there's like a relatively short shelf life, just means there's going to be some waste in that system, right? It's not going to have, optimal efficiency. But yeah, so what motivated you, Jimmy, to kind of get involved with this? Kind of what are some of your motivations to do the work?
I think for me, before I came back, I grew up in Kentucky. Before I came back here, I left for a long time. I left for about 16, 18 years, something like that. But directly before I came back to Kentucky, I was working in coffee, and I was spending a lot of time in Central and South America. And I, at one point, was spending as much time working out of the country as I was working in the country. And I think I just decided, I was like, you know what? I want to come back to Kentucky. I want to work directly with producers and find a way to, I think, work in a sustainable way in this country. So that was kind of what led to it. And I started working for Glean Kentucky about 8 years ago, actually as a co-employee of another food-centered nonprofit here, Food Chain. And Glean Kentucky, as Food Chain, was opening up their commercial processing kitchen. So I was kind of sourcing produce and funneling it into that kitchen as they were turning it into processed food products and then redistributing it to feeding organizations for Glean Kentucky. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I started as a coordinator with Glean Kentucky and eventually kind of moved into the program director position.
So it sounds like, there's definitely an elaborate system of nonprofits that are like out, looking to kind of answer many of the different challenges of the kind of inefficiencies in our food system and the, inadequacies of our food system. Yeah. How do you guys interact with some of the federal programs that people might be familiar with, like, food stamps or the school lunch program? What's the role of the nonprofit kind of universe in that?
Well, I think for Glean Kentucky, we're a little different in that we really don't at this point. We have absolutely delivered. For instance, there's an orchard in Paris that we work with, and we've absolutely delivered apples from them to school backpack programs, but we don't really interact. We're not really involved with SNAP, simply because everything that we deliver is free. It has to be. That's what we do. So no, there cannot be a transaction of any sort. At least at this point, in terms of what we do. However, I think I'd just kind of pivot a little bit from that and say that, yeah, you're right. Nonprofits absolutely, food-centered nonprofits and feeding-centered nonprofits absolutely are serving a purpose that I would say the federal government used to serve, where essentially nonprofits are essentially the safety net now that used to exist within the federal government. And that's what all of these food-centered nonprofits are doing. They're, they are filling that role, which essentially, not that it doesn't exist, but it's greatly diminished from what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I don't want to like pull politics into this, but it's my understanding that the Biden administration actually increased some SNAP benefits, some food stamp benefits, and it's already been circled by the Doge brothers, looking at areas they can like trim government inefficiency, right? Like claw back some of these hard fought benefits of like the $70 a month or whatever that were bumped up for the first time in a very, very long time. So yeah, in terms of not the safety net is frayed, it is inadequate, and thank God people like Glean Kentucky are there, kind of in the breach, doing what is really, it's just, I'll just say it, it's like painful that in the nation as wealthy as we are, that anyone goes hungry, right? And it is, I'm glad that you and your volunteers are seeking to, help fill some of those gaps, but it's just so tragic that we've got so many of them.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. And that, it is flawed. It's, the system is flawed. That's why we exist. Where I try not to mince words when I'm talking about what we do. And I also try and make sure that I'm not using irresponsible language and say that we're solving a problem. We're not solving a problem. We are, we're a thimble at the end of a very flawed system trying to do what we can to redistribute food.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Jimmy is solving hunger in Kentucky.
No, I am not. Glean Kentucky is not. We are doing what we can. And I mean, it's interesting. So along with Glean Kentucky, I'm also serving as the chairperson of the board of directors for a national organization called the Association of Gleaning Organizations. So that has it's given me a very different perspective, or just a wider perspective, I guess, on this kind of work and what's going on nationwide with it. And I think I would just say that, funding issues aside, maybe, I think that in a lot of ways, we are, not we specifically Glean Kentucky, but organizations like ours and like Food Chain and Seed Leaf or Feed Louisville and Louisville, organizations such as these are better able to get into communities on a granular level than a federal program would be. So that, there are ways in which it's maybe not all bad. There are positive aspects of it. But yeah, I don't know.
It's clear. I think very obvious, very important that you guys are out there. And it's not just an indictment of the system as it currently is situated. But yeah, Dr. Clardy, final thoughts, final questions.
Yes, you do some outstanding work, and you are certainly to be commended for it. I know it's very hard work and very heartfelt work. So, what can we do to support your efforts? We, being the people who are listening online, those folks who are concerned about food insecurity and food waste, people who are really passionate about this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a number of ways to contribute. I mean, gleanky.org is our website. Go there. You can do everything from fill out an application, sign up to volunteer, to becoming an individual financial donor. all of that, every single way that anybody can contribute is extremely valuable to us, even if it's, if you're an individual financial donor, whether that's $1, $10, $50, more than that, everything is valuable to us in just whatever way you can. And volunteering with us is pretty easy. A lot of times for scheduled volunteer runs, which essentially consist of picking up from grocery stores, we're talking about 30 to 60 minutes whenever you want to do it, and you're literally fulfilling our entire mission every time you do that. You're transporting produce from point A to point B and getting it to people who need it. It's a pretty simple, easy way to make a contribution, and we'd love to have you.
Glean KY, and that's Glean GLEAN, just in case you, like me, have problems spelling sometimes. GLEANKY.org. Great organization. You can and where are those areas that people can volunteer? Like, it's not everywhere, but where are the kind of like specific
Yeah, specifically, we're probably the most active in Lexington in terms of scheduled volunteer opportunities that you can sign up for. But we are in Oldham County and Louisville. Right now, we're in Bowling Green and surrounding areas. So just go check out our website and see what you can do. And then, if you have questions, absolutely, easy ways to get in touch with us via the website. Fire away.
Awesome. Well, that's how I found out about you. Is one of our volunteer board members mentioned that they'd volunteered with Glean Kentucky, and it was good work, important work. So really cool. Thank you so much for sharing the important work you guys are doing and joining us on Kernels of Truth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Really, really wonderful to chat with Jimmy Earley with Glean Kentucky. Hope folks give them a check them out. As you're thinking about your kind of end of year and holiday giving, really good place to direct some resources. And yeah, so I think we're going to move on. We have got some stuff to do before we let you go this evening. Really important to have our call to action right now. That's one that I think I've mentioned it. If you've watched the past 2 weeks, you've heard me call this one out, but I want to give you an update, a really important update for our call to action. This is we are looking to expand excused early voting, right? So we're up to 30 actions so far on our effort to expand excused early voting to include caregivers to the ill and the infirm, voters who are currently allowed to use the 6 days of excused early voting in Kentucky. As many of our friends and listeners likely know, there are 3 days of no excuse early voting. That's the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before the Tuesday election. What a lot of folks experienced with no excuse early voting was very long lines, which really works against the ill or the infirm and their caregivers. So utilizing the 6 days before the no excuse days will allow for shorter lines and increased flexibility, exactly what those folks need to utilize their right to select our representatives and to weigh in on ballot measures. Really good news on this effort. Friend Adam Moore has taken up the issue. He is a common sense, solutions-oriented new lawmaker, but he is in the Democratic Party, so I think we'll want to see if we can continue to build support for this effort. Find him a Republican representative or two to work with. Please take action. Click through right now. We're putting it in the chat so you can click on it yourself. It's really simple. It takes just a couple of clicks. Add your name, send a letter to your senator, to your representative. If you are a caregiver, if you know a caregiver, if somebody who's needed a caregiver, add that information in. You can edit the letter. It's gonna be a lot more powerful if you've got a kind of firsthand story. But yeah, again, really, really important that we just take this, I think, what is a very non-partisan step to just expand voting flexibility and availability for folks who really do need it. All right, so that's our call to action. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it to our friend Dr. Clardy to close this out. Oops, I think you are muted, sir. So whatever you said, you're going to need to re-say it. What's going on here? Hey, Dr. Clardy, you're going to need to unmute yourself.
And I am unmuted.
There it is.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Because
Aaron,
Kimberly
thank
was
you for
not
having
here.
me.
Because Kimberly was not here this week, somebody had to provide that role. So I'm glad you took care of it.
I know, right? But thank you for having me on the show. And that was a really good interview with Jimmy Earley. I think we covered a lot of ground on what's going on in our Commonwealth and in our country. And going into 2025, we will continue these dialogues and discussions. And I look forward to being a part of that process. And I thank you once again. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, also known as CAVE. We are proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Make sure to join us next week to hear the story of how compassionate kids in Frankfort took a stand to oppose puppy mills and won. Production of episode 190 was kind of, sort of, but very well produced. I will add, very well produced by Aaron. Nate Orshon wrote and performed our theme song. You can find more information about and music at natosongs.com. Keep an ear tuned because I understand we have a new song dropping soon, and I'm looking forward to hearing that. If you miss our weekly live stream, if you just happen to miss our weekly live stream on Facebook, YouTube, our podcast and our show notes are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Hold on one second. Okay. All right. If you do listen to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening right now. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening.